When you think of the best pitchers in baseball from the 1990s, there's a handful of guys that should always come to mind. Randy Johnson, Greg Maddux, and Pedro Martinez are probably the big three that should stand out for everyone. But there's another 90s ace that carved through hitters at an elite level as well and should really be in this discussion. A man who was consistently one of the best pitchers in baseball in the late 90s, with numbers that age well to this day, especially in an era known for its offense. Kevin Brown. 6-time All-Star, 2-time ERA champ, the ace of two teams that went to the World Series. He had a solid career, but not too many people then or now really had a grasp of how good he was. With a unique motion that could have become iconic and a nasty sinker that could top 95 miles an hour, he was nasty. And surprisingly, not a pitcher you could easily find highlights of. There's definitely some overlap between how underrated Kevin Brown is and how underrated John Olerud is looking back at the two as they played in the same time period. We recently did a video on Olerud, a first baseman from the 90s whose career is also underappreciated. Go check it out when you're done with this video if you'd like. One crazy thing Kevin Brown and John Olerud have in common. They both reached the major leagues in the same year they were drafted. Kevin Brown was drafted 4th overall at a Georgia Tech by the Texas Rangers, and after 6 games in the minors, they just called him up. He made his major league debut on September 30th, 1986, 3 months after he was drafted. He picked up a win in his debut, pitching 5 innings and giving up 2 runs. After spending most of the next 2 years in the minors, he officially had his rookie year in 1989, which makes you wonder why he made that one start back in 86 at all, but yeah. All things considered, he had a solid rookie season. He then was a roughly average big league pitcher in 1990 and 91, but had his breakout year in 92. In 1992, Kevin Brown went 21-11, started the All-Star game, and led baseball in innings pitched with a 3.32 ERA and 2.99 FIP, which is basically ERA for factors a pitcher can usually control. The next year he put up similar but slightly worse numbers, although he pitched 3 shutouts in 1993. Now's probably a good time to mention how much he pitched in those 2 years. In 1992 and 93, Kevin Brown managed to pitch 498 and 2/3 innings and throw 23 complete games. Numbers that could never be replicated today. And maybe that's for a reason, because Kevin Brown had his worst season as a Ranger in 1994. Easy to think he was worn out. But that ended up being his final year in Texas before spending 1 solid year in Baltimore. The standout stat from his 1 year in Baltimore is his 1.33 ERA+. ERA+ works the same way as OPS+ in that it tries to create one number that explains how good someone is compared to their peers in a given year, with stadium factors included. It's important for this video because it'll better tell us how good someone was in context, and Kevin Brown pitched in a time known for insane levels of offense, so pitchers' ERAs were usually higher. 100 is always average, so 133 means he was roughly 33% better at preventing teams from scoring than an average pitcher that year. That offseason, he would take his talents to South Beach and join the Florida Marlins. And in 1996, Kevin Brown tore the National League apart. He led all of baseball in ERA, ERA+, and WHIP, and he almost doubled his strikeout to walk ratio from the year before. But only 2 writers voted for him for the Cy Young Award. John Smoltz easily won the award, even though Kevin Brown had him beat in these categories on screen. Should have been a much closer race. Foolish Baseball has a great video where he breaks down how Cy Young voters used to prioritize some of the wrong variables in voting that we'll leave in the description in case you want more perspective. In 97, he came out strong again. Only he'd add 2 more accomplishments to his resume. On June 10th, 1997, Kevin Brown pitched a no-hitter. He was 1 hit by pitch in the 8th away from a perfect game, and Kevin Brown won a ring as the ace of the 1997 Marlins. That team has a weird legacy that may come back to bite Kevin Brown, but in that postseason run, he did something else that was special. During Game 6 of the 1997 NLCS, Kevin Brown had the flu. He still went out and pitched a complete game that sent the Marlins to the World Series. But when Birmingham Barons legend Michael Jordan has a flu game, it becomes one of the biggest moments in sports history. You probably didn't even know there was a baseball flu game. The 1997 Marlins were immediately broken up after that World Series, and Kevin Brown was traded to the Padres. And would you look at that? Kevin Brown did it again. Even the big playoff performance was repeated. In Game 1 of the NLDS, Kevin Brown struck out 16 Astros in 8 shutout innings, beating Randy Johnson in possibly the best stretch of his career in a pitcher's duel. Those 16 strikeouts are the second most ever in a playoff game, with some recognizable names behind him, and a couple guys 99% of the viewers have never heard of. The Padres would be swept in the '98 World Series by the Yankees, but that wasn't Kevin Brown's fault. He showed out again that season with more great numbers, but in one of the closest three-man Cy Young races ever, he came out in third. You could realistically say that in hindsight, Kevin Brown had the most deserving year of the three. His wins above replacement in 1998, according to Baseball Reference, was 8.6. That means the Padres won about 8.6 more games because they had him instead of a replacement level pitcher. His WAR was the same as Justin Verlander's when he won the MVP. That would be his only year in San Diego, because Kevin Brown was about to get paid a lot. No, really, a lot of money. Kevin Brown would sign with the Dodgers for 7 years and $105 million to become the first player in baseball history to sign for $100 million. Maybe that's what it took for the Dodgers to sign him, since he had said he would have liked to play closer to his hometown in Georgia. But man, Kevin Brown got paid and he earned it. He still put up really strong numbers with the Dodgers, with his peak being in 2000. Brown led the NL in ERA and WHIP while posting a 167 ERA plus and 216 strikeouts. And how high did he finish in the Cy Young voting? 6th place. 6th place, that doesn't... Are you serious? Here's probably why that happened. Kevin Brown wasn't the most liked person in baseball. He had a bad reputation within the game and with the media. The story changes here. This is the time where Kevin Brown allegedly started using PEDs. His Dodger years especially will be clouded, and rightfully so, but the rest of his career seems to have been as well. He'd pitch until 2005, finishing with a very good career stat line. There's this stat called JAWS in baseball that tries to measure how worthy someone is for the Hall of Fame compared to other players at their position through a ranking system. It uses their career wins above replacement and averages it with their 7-year peak wins above replacement. If you go strictly by JAWS, Kevin Brown is a top 50 starting pitcher ever, but he only got 12 Hall of Fame votes ever. 2.1% of the ballot. That's something else. Was it his reputations and PED concerns that kept him out? Who knows? But there's something else to point out. Kevin Brown's time where we'll hypothetically say he was on PEDs was 2000 and on, because we were unable to find any evidence that he was up to any shenanigans before that. He's one of the few players who was said to be cheating, and the supposed cheating was not when he was having his best years. We are in no way defending him if he was juicing, and there's evidence that he was. But what if it was like this? He had earned the biggest contract in baseball history and was constantly overlooked for awards he had a good case that he deserved. That and the pressure of living up to his contract could have changed things for him. Not saying that's what happened though, because we really don't know. And again, not justifying it if he broke the rules. It's just something to think about. Not everything is black and white though, and we may never know the truth about Kevin Brown. Kevin Brown at his best was good enough to earn a spot in the conversation of best pitchers in the 90s. He was consistent throughout most of his career and had his best years before the possible PED usage came into play. And it's wild that he wasn't always recognized for that, both back then and especially now.